Welcome to Coaching Culture, the podcast about cultivating culture and leadership. I'm Ben Herring. I've been loving this side of the game for bloody ages. Today's guest is Stu Edwards. He has just been appointed the Finland Head Coach. What an awesome team to coach. Stu was on the podcast 6 months ago as he was working on a research problem through his honours degree at the University of Wales, Trinity St David. And since then, he has now got a first-class honours degree because of the research, the first ever academic deep dive into stress factors and mental health support systems for rugby union coaches. And now it's complete, and his book, The Invisible Load, is out now on Amazon. And it deals with the pressure, the stress, the wellbeing, and sustainable coaching for rugby union coaches. And as a side, I'm privileged to actually have a little foreword in there. And this research is important for coaches of any sport and leaders of anything at all. And much like this podcast, the content is wide-ranging and cross-transferable. And today, we're just going to dive into some of those key findings from his book, The Invisible Load, which deals with all this stuff around coaching, which sometimes is hard to measure and often intangible. Stu Edwards, welcome back to the Coaching Culture podcast.
Thanks for having me again, Ben. It's a real privilege to be here.
Well, mate, firstly, quite a bit of congratulations for you. Firstly, the head coaching role of the Finland team. Congratulations, mate. What an absolute joy to be an international coach. It's a rare group of people that can say they've coached internationally, and you're now one of them.
Yeah, it's a bit surreal, but I'm very privileged to be given that role in such an amazing country. I'm looking forward to taking them forward to try and improve what all the real good work has already been carried out there.
Yeah, mate. I know you've got strong links to the land, which is awesome. On your other side of things, the bit where we're loving is this research that you're doing. You're now also been given this awesome first-class honours degree because of it. But the research is now done. How is that feeling, mate? You've spent a long time gathering the research and making something which is often considered immeasurable. You've given a bit of academic credence to it. How is the feeling now that the research is complete?
Well, part one of the research is complete. To be fair, it's given me such enthusiasm to kick on from that first question that came to my mind. Listen, this has been an incredible journey that I'm going to continue on because it's so important, and the information I've had from people so far, it's been breathtaking, and I just hope this can make some sort of impact on raising awareness and start a conversation to support building healthier and sustainable coaching environments.
Because it's actually so let's dive into it, mate. So the book's now done, and you've put all that research and findings, and you've made it readable. The Invisible Load on Amazon right now. What is the invisible load of coaching in your mind?
Okay, so if I give you a little bit of a brief story around the book, like I said just now, it started with a question I couldn't ignore. Why are so many good coaches carrying pressure, carrying that stress and responsibility that rarely gets spoken about openly? I've been lucky enough to be around some really good coaching environments, from community to performance-based settings, and you notice that the role of the coach is far bigger than what people see on the sideline. I think, how can we say this? The people see the session plan, they see the team talk, the selection, the match day decisions, and the performance outcomes, but I don't really think they don't see what the emotional weight is behind the role. They don't always see the coach driving home thinking about a player who's struggling. They don't see the coach questioning whether they handled a difficult conversation properly. They don't always see the coach trying to balance that kind of family, work, performance, expectations, the disappointment, pressure, and responsibility. And that's where the book came from, in all honesty, Ben. I think what I really need to get across is that it's not written to kind of criticize the game. I've written it to start a more honest conversation about the people behind the performance. As I said just now, the more I researched it, the more conversations I had with coaches. It's quite clear that it became, it's not just an individual issue. It's not simply about coaches needing to be tougher, more resilient, or better coping. I think it was more about the environments coaches are working in, about the support, about the trust, and whether coaches felt they were able to speak honestly without fear of any judgment really. So with regards to the start of part one of my research, this book is kind of more of an awareness piece, first of all. And I think for me, it's going to be the first stage of a wider body of work that I will continue to develop. And as the research continues to progress, my aim is not to claim that I have all the answers to any of this at all by any stretch of the imagination. But my main aim is to give that language to someone, something many coaches have felt perhaps they don't have, or they haven't been able to explain. And that's kind of the story behind the invisible load.
Mate, that's awesome. I just think that's such a cool concept, mate. Just the raising awareness. And I remember a mentor of mine once said about reading books in general is like, when you read someone's autobiography or a research thing like this, it sometimes just solidifies something that's been bouncing around in your head, and someone else has articulated it well with good research and stuff like that. And you just have that moment where you just go, oh man, this is exactly what's been spinning in my head, which I haven't been able to articulate myself. And someone has put it down in words and given me some concrete, reassurance that this is not, I'm not just a weirdo or losing my mind here, that it's something clear, right? So that's the beauty of putting something like this in a book.
Yeah, 100%. I think so hopefully if people can get anything from it, it'd be great.
Yeah, man. And you're not mucking around with some of your guests, mate. Like, you got the likes of Stuart Lancaster, Gary Gold, Mark Jones from the Ospreys. And amongst that also, you've also got like university professors as well. So you've got it's the same stuff, right?
100%. What surprised me the most about it wasn't the coaches, didn't experience pressure. Anyone who's been involved in coaching understands that there's pressure is part of that role. And it's, but what did surprise me was how consistent some of the themes were across the different levels of games. Because, you quite rightly mentioned a lot of really good big names there. To add to that, John Mitchell, but I've also gone to a lot of grassroots coaches as well. Ian Probert at Ebbw Vale, you got Jason Strange at Ebbw Vale as well. There's loads of people out there, and the context is unbelievable. It might change, but the emotional experience was often very similar. Now, the grassroots coach may be dealing with work, family, volunteers, parents, very limited resources, as we've all been there, trying to keep a club environment going. Whereas a professional or international coach might be dealing with contracts, selection pressure, performance scrutiny, role insecurity, and that kind of public expectation. So the environments are very different, but the human experience of carrying responsibility, pressure, and the emotional load was a strong reoccurring theme. But the other thing that stood out was that many coaches weren't asking for sympathy. They weren't saying like, feel sorry for us. They were asking for kind of understanding. They were asking for a bit of trust, definitely clearer support. And they were asking for environments where they could be honest, that feeling that honesty might get used against them. And I feel that was very powerful. That was very, very powerful indeed. But the one big thing that kind of really surprised me was how often the support for these people, doesn't matter what level, from grassroots to professional, appeared to be very informal, very inconsistent and reactive. So in many cases, the support depended on who you knew, who you trusted, or whether the problem had already become serious. And that is important, to be honest with you, because if support only appears when someone is already struggling, then we're waiting way too long. And when it comes to the research, I'm still careful with the detail because the research is still being finalized, but the overall message is clear. I don't think the coach well-being can't be left to chance anymore. It really needs to be considered, structured, and taken seriously.
It's some cool words just in there. Understanding, not sympathy, is what coaches want, and I concur with it. That's exactly right. No, I don't think it's the nature of a coach to want sympathy around what they're doing. But you also talk about some of the support networks are currently informal and pretty inconsistent, which is very true. So you're almost saying part of this research and awareness is actually for those that are providing those support sort of roles, like the directors of rugby's or the presidents of clubs or the chief supporter or even the parents committee at a lower grade, like your lead parent in your support group or the most vocal parent in an underage team. Like, that person actually has a more formalized role, right? Like to be able to lend their assistance to a head coach or any coach, right?
100%. And not to come a bit negative there was a lot of clubs that had some really great systems in place, and a lot of people are really happy. So it's not a case of it being all doom and gloom and everyone is terrible everywhere. But certain clubs and certain environments and certain coaching groups hit the note quite well, and they were supporting each other, again, by themselves, not through anything else, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, it's actually fascinating. Just recently, we at one of our games, the coach had a bit of an incident where it sort of blew up a little bit, and the reaction was not like it was looking at the outcome, like what the coach did, rather than actually stopping and going, why has that happened? Why has that blow up occurred? Yeah. And no one really stopped to think, is this coach all right? Because that's not normal for them. And so we're critiquing the blow up, but what we're not actually looking at and checking on is the pressure that's mounted, and then there was a straw that broke the camel's back. And then that's the thing we're like, well, you shouldn't blow up on that. However, we don't know the background of what's led to that. And there's a lot of that stuff, right?
Oh, 100%. And what we've got to remember is that this isn't an individual resilience issue. This is also a huge environmental and organizational issue. I think how you've explained that there, it all comes down to our environment and how people are seeing each other. And is it a supportive environment, or is it people out to get themselves and look after themselves?
Do you think part of this, because not all clubs and things will have, that forethought to actually do that, but do you think it's part of the coach's role at the start of the season to potentially bring this sort of awareness to the club they're at or the environment they're at, to actually they take a little bit of ownership around, this is the support I'm going to need, parents or, fans? Do you reckon that's an important part?
Yeah, I think it is, but then that comes down to a lot of themes that are coming through around the confidentiality and trust. A lot of people were afraid to bring it up because it came to them to contracts, or, they might not agree with what the coach is asking, and some environments are totally different, but some environments are really supportive. But I think we need to have a platform where people can, and coaches especially, can be open and honest and say, listen, this is what I expect, this is what I need. And I think we discussed it last time in the podcast. I think people need to be understanding of the situation of where the club is at the time as well, and how are you building that confidentiality and trust? Are you building in that coach well and being to help give that performance as well? Because it comes back down to that cracking example what you've just given there, is that emotional load. What is going on with that coach at that time for him to react like that? Because the coaches are often required to manage their own emotions while also regulating the emotions of everyone else within the team. They're supporting disappointed players, they're managing conflict within players or fellow coaches, they're dealing with the pressure from committees, sponsors, trying to motivate staff, communicate to parents, trying to absorb that criticism, and then they've still got to appear calm and composed.
That's
and
right.
One thing I've come out of it is that, and your example is fantastically comes onto it, a lot of coaching is emotional labour. And the coaches are constantly managing people, relationships, expectations and pressure by managing themselves as well, which if you pull all that into one melting pot, that is crazy.
I love that phrase, mate, emotional labour that coaches have to put themselves through. And I think that's such a good phrase, because good coaches are pretty empathetic people. They're very have the ability to put themselves in someone else's shoes, which is the definition of an empathetic leader. However, like the emotional toll that takes by constantly going into someone else's shoes and multiple different sets of shoes, as it starts to sink into your being a little bit, right? Like that's the thing of it. Like your shoes don't fit so well anymore.
Yeah, it's true. But I think coming back onto what you were saying there, I think the organizations need to kind of step up and take this issue seriously, because they're expecting that person to lead a squad of 40 people, perhaps plus 10, 15 backroom staff. And bear in mind, it doesn't need a huge budget to get this. And I think organizations, for them, it starts with intentionality. I think they need to create, not just from the coach, the club and the expectation, need to create that space for those proper conversations to happen. The mentoring, the clearer role expectations, the peer support, better leadership awareness, and all that can make a difference. And I just think that's what they need to do. It's got to be, it starts with intentionality from the organization and the environment to create that amazing culture.
You said the word just earlier, confidentiality. Why is that an important piece when you're talking about this wellness space for coaches?
Because what I did understand from a lot of the conversations I had with these amazing coaches from grassroots to the professional game is that confidentiality came up quite a lot because, as we well know, unfortunately, things get leaked into for the professional game most into the press about whether they're going to have a job or whether there's a problem going on, or if there's another coach who wants their role. I think there's a lot of issue around people being worried to speak up because I don't think they feel they're safe. Some people were some coaches avoiding asking questions and asking for help because the concern around that judgment, that selection, the reputation, how does that affect their employability or being perceived as being unable to cope? So for me, if coaches do not trust the system around them, they're unlikely to speak honest within it. And I think that's key. If you want to go back to that phrase, that lovely phrase that gets banded about, we have a psychologically safe environment because where anyone can ask a question. But do they feel safe with the responses they're going to get?
Yeah. That phrase is coming up more and more, particularly on this show too. It's really becoming a strong repeating theme, isn't it? The psychological safety, and not just rugby, but in all workspace environments. I know Google did a big review and they found that was the key for the teams that they had, like psychological safety in the Google teams. That was the number one thing that the research showed that employees valued, and why teams worked well was when psychological safety was there. What does it mean, mate? What is the definition of that in your eyes?
I was going to say, because I don't know the definition off the top. I think it's just being in a safe environment. And what I just said now is being able to perhaps have a chat like we're having now, understanding and knowing whatever you're talking about, you're not going to feel judged. You feel safe that you can disclose that, listen, this is my problems. How can you help out? Have you got any sort of ideas of, have you been in a situation before? Can you help me? Some pointers. And I think that's what came back from a lot of coaches, and that's why there's a lot of informal support networks around there. Like when I spoke to yourself, you deal with a small number of trusted people around you that you trust, and you can confidentially confide in, knowing that what you say isn't going to be used against you in the future. Like coming back to the concern around that judgment or the reputation. So for me, it's being able to speak to someone safely without having to worry about what you're disclosing is going to come back to either harm you or cause you problems in the future.
I think it's. I would go one step further, and it's probably in everything, right? Even if you take it as a coach, as a person, even like let's go to a marriage between husband and wife, or whatever combination marriage it is. Like the more psychological safety, where you can tell your partner exactly how you're feeling about anything. I certainly know now with my wife, the more we talk openly and say, this is how I'm feeling about this, or you said this and this is now what I'm feeling. And if there's no judgment or scorn or reaction in a negative way to whatever's said, if it's actually received like, I appreciate you telling me that, it actually does wonders for a relationship when you do it well, right? Like if my wife often picks me up, is like, just to let you know, you said this at dinner and it's made me think about this. I don't think you're meaning it like that. And I'm like, nah, not at all. But thank you for telling me that. Like, I'll be more conscious around my wording next time. But and now that you know that, now you're better equipped and you're better able to support her, and she's able to better, and just the connection piece is good there. And that's the psychological safety you want, where you can be pulled up and there's no problem with it. And this is the same with your research, right?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I think you're right. I think the word I'd probably say is having to put things across in the right context that everyone understands. So it's having that correct language, because we use it in the rugby field, right? We use it for our line of calls, our defensive strikes, our attacking strikes. It's probably the best way to say it is we got to use the right language to make sure that we have that ability to trust each other.
Yes, and I'll use the right language to make sure we trust each other. And I would also maybe even tweak. It's to start point. It's maybe just use your language to start with. Practice just saying stuff, right? And being brave about saying how you feel. And because as soon as you say stuff, sometimes it's like when you read a book and you get that moment, sometimes verbalizing it to someone,
Yeah.
even if you're not saying it in a great way, is actually a nice way of cementing your thoughts. And sometimes it goes, actually, I'm pretty good with that now. I just need to vent.
Yeah, I just need to get it out.
Mate, I guess this is the question from your research in the book, is this, what we're talking about is kind of healthy coaching practice. But do you think has the research come back to sort of suggest that potentially we've normalized unhealthy coaching and over like sort of set a level of expectation that a coach just needs to grin and bear it a little bit? And is that changing in modern coaching practice?
Yeah, it is changing in modern day practice, and I think, like you said, I'm quite lucky enough to have spoken to coaches from different areas of the game, from young coaches to elder statesmen who've been around for a long time, and you got a lot of feedback around if the going got tough and I was in a bit of a bad spot or it was a difficult period of the rugby team that you're coaching. The answer was just to work harder and just dig in, crack on, instead of going, right, okay. But now you got the younger coaches who are embracing a different aspect of looking at how can I do better here. It's taking that step back and going, right, do you know what? I'm actually going to speak to someone and say, right, I'm in this bit of a pickle here now. I'm in this spot. It's really tough. Have you been in this environment before? Any sort of advice you can give me? Any sort of, because when you're in there and you're looking at something in the face, you can't, that old sort of saying, you can't see the woods for the trees because you just can't work out what's going on. So I think it's just having that clarity of being able to speak to people, and a lot of the feedback has come back as there is a stigma still out there. There are some barriers around, we're men, we've got to be tough, we got to just grin and bear it and get on with it. But then there's the new sort of way of thinking of, do you know what? No, let's build our support network of the right people around you. As one coach is get the right people on the bus. We can do a lot of stuff then to make sure that we've got that support, we've got that ability to deal with what we're dealing with at that time.
Yeah, man. I think that's a really important point you raised about sometimes you can't see the woods from the trees when you're in that swirl, that coaching swirl. And say for this analogy, like you're going down a whirlpool, you're stuck in your ship's going down and you're panicking because you can sense yourself going down. That's where it's so important to there's someone sitting on the island over there watching you. And if you just reach out and go, what should I do? And they're looking at it from a very different perspective. They're calm. They're not emotional. They'll say, hey, mate, just tack your sail to the left and that'll steer you out. And it's someone that's not in the swirl being able to add their perspective is sometimes all you need, right? Like it's just once you're in it, that coaching swirl, which I guess is something that only coaches really know what that swirl is because you don't expect it. You talked about the people don't see the public expectation. You don't see that emotional baggage which coaches carry because you don't know it until you're up there standing in front of 30 people and you're getting hit with all these different things, right? So to be able to reach out to someone that you respect that's sitting on an island which is not in the swirl, that can see the woods from the trees, and just being able to do that more regularly and just snapping you out of that downward spiral that all coaches experience from time to time.
And everyone I spoke to, everyone has experienced it, whether it's grassroots, academies, semi-professional, professional, and international. Everyone has experienced it. And I think we need to normalize the fact that everyone's been through it. And if you can just part that sort of little bit of a golden nugget to help someone deal with that situation, I think that's what we got to do. This is what it all comes back to. It's like that coach well-being really affects the performance. It really affects it. I mean, coaches shape environments, and that's where we've got to get to. We've got all these fantastic players from a grassroots level who will turn up week in, week out because they want to play. No, they want to play because they enjoy it, and they want to have that person in front of them to help them shape and enjoy that environment. And then the same when you go to the professional environment. You go in there because you've got all these amazing, if you look at some of the top French teams, they spend millions of pounds on players. And you've got that one person who's shaping that environment, just dealing with everything on his own. They shape the standards, the communication, they shape the relationships, they shape the emotional climate of a team. And that, like I said, comes down to a grassroots coach to the professionals. And I think, I don't know whether you can sort of take to this as well, is if a coach is constantly exhausted, isolated, unsupported and emotionally overloaded, that does not stay separate from the environment. It affects how they'll communicate. It affects how they make their decisions, how they manage conflicts, going back to the example you just gave short time ago, and how they respond under the pressure and how they will connect to those players. And I mean, I don't think it means that the coaches need to have a perfect lives or stress-free environments, because coaching will always involve that pressure. But I think, how can I say this now? The difference here between healthy pressure and support, between healthy and unsupported pressure. Healthy pressure can challenge people, sharpen thinking, and kind of drive the standards a little bit more. But unsupported pressure can really wear you down. It can wear people down, and coaches can be really struggled. So from the research and the chat and so many different people, when the coaches are actually supported properly, they're able to they're likely to think more clearly and communicate better. I think there's got less pressure on them to be able to regulate their emotion, build that trust. And then I think that'll create environments where players and coaches alike can thrive. And I think this is where I always come back to the idea that coach well-being isn't separate from that performance. I think it sits under the performance, because we do care a lot about player development, which is fantastic. That team culture, long-term performance. And I think we really need to hit the nail on the head and care about the well-being of those people leading the environment. But coming back to what you were saying just now, this kind of answers that question as well. I think it's not about making coaching soft. I think it's making it more sustainable.
Yeah. I think that's a really important phrase. I don't think this stuff is soft at all, and that's a big one for rugby, because when we're talking about these sort of softer skills, they're not soft at all. These are actually the hardest skills to perfect, and you will never perfect them. You'll just be able to grow yourself that little bit better all the time, right? And that's a big shift from potentially previous generations around this stuff. And certainly chatting to a lot of older coaches these days, the good ones have been aware that you just can't stay in the old way. If you want to be relevant and present in the modern coaching world, this is the shift that has to take. And it's a good shift. It's a fantastic shift. And some of the more experienced coaches that I know who are further down the track, 60, 70 years old, they are just the examples of how you mold your coaching and change and tack when needed, when the situation and society asks for it, you're able to. And this is what's happening now. What your research is showing is sort of articulating what the general consensus is feeling underneath, right? Like it is. This is all the feedback you've got. And from a more subjective measure, I can feel it on I look after 54 coaches, and I can feel this sentiment is so true. Like, just gut feel of it. The little conversations I have it's important. Just on what you're saying now, I think just another little tweak that I quite like is when you're not in good space yourself, it's really hard to be the best coach you can be, because the lens that you're watching everything through is distorted. It's if you've got pressure and you're feeling average and a bit antsy, then everything that comes your way is filtered through that lens. So then you're antsy at whatever that person said and someone comes to you with a genuine question, and you take it as a negative because you're in that headspace. That's the lens you're looking at. And then the answer you give is maybe a little bit sarcastic or short or blunt and not delivered particularly well because of the lens which is clouding your mentality and your being. And so this is where you don't become your best coach. And so what you need is someone or something to be able to just snap you out of that, to just blow those clouds away, so you can actually take everything with, at best, just a neutral perspective. Someone's coming to me with this. Okay, that's a good question. I can answer that like this, rather than going, not another person coming at me with X, Y, and Z, and beat it, go away. I'm sick and tired of people coming to me with complaints. But you're the coach. Yeah, but... And then that starts that whole chain. And then the grumpy coach, all that becomes the norm, which is not the best way. It's a way, but it's definitely not the best way, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's why you have good people around you then, I think, Ben, so they know you. I
think that, Stu, is probably having good people around you is probably one of the coaching gifts you can do. And if you're in a role, and I'll give an example here. I was privileged enough to have Steve Hansen as my director of rugby for a number of years. And having someone like that, where when I was going through a bit of a swirl, and I did have that psychological safety with him, I'd say, mate, I'm just struggling with this. I've made these couple of decisions and I'm getting a bit of pushback here. What do you reckon? And in a way that only he could do, he goes, no, mate, the decision's sound. Yeah, there'll be a bit of friction there, but it'll come right, always does. And then bang, you're out of that swirl because you had someone good there, and whatever level you're at. I've done it once before in amateur club coaching where I just got an old club stalwart to come and be the kit man of our team, and for the same reason, he just had good rapport, good head on his shoulders, and he was my go-to guy. And that sometimes I'd be like, Sean, what do you reckon the team's going through now? Do you reckon they're enjoying what's been delivered? And he goes, they are, mate. They're expressing it a bit different. And then all of a sudden it just goes, okay, cool, boom. I had that person just vent and blow those clouds away. Then my lens was better to be able to be neutral at best. So I think wherever you're coaching, to have that sort of person like you talked about that you can just go to, someone you trust in the environment. If you haven't got one, bring someone in. And to be honest, mate, like a lot of people love being asked into an environment, like someone that's maybe retired or has links to the club, to just say, come in on a Tuesday night and just love your overview. And then end of the session, you just say, what did you see? What was good? What do you think about this that I'm doing? And it makes a big difference.
Yeah, massive. I totally agree with you. And obviously not a lot of people have that luxury. But like you said, even if it's the old stalwart on the committee and the grassroots team, give them that kind of role, gives them that kind of self-importance as well, but also adds value to the club and the environment. But obviously for the professional games, I think definitely need to have peer support with coaches and mentors and things. I think that would be an ideal world, wouldn't it?
It would be. And mate, when you're doing this book, has there been any surprises along the way? Anything that's jumped out? You're like, that's fascinating.
I think the main thing is that we when we spoke about it, I think it was more a lot of the work-life balance and the kind of the switching off element of it. They found it very difficult, didn't they? Because coaches is very relational, and you're coaching because you care. You often think about players, the selection conversations, maybe the performances, the mistakes, as you just alluded to there. Is your training session, is your session plan hitting right? Is it hitting the right note? Your future planning outside of the formal working hours, people don't see the coaches after the training session, because for many coaches, the session might finish about 8, 9 o'clock at night. But the coach doesn't stop there. They keep on going, and that just adds on to then the emotional labor we talked about earlier on. So it's just a continuous ongoing cycle where that whirlpool is swirling around constantly. It was interesting to find out how people were struggling with their work-life balance with family, switching off, what they did to switch off, how they managed to do that. A lot of people were really good at it. A lot of people just said, nah, we'll just work harder and crack on. I was really surprised at that.
Surprised at how many people really had that struggle to maintain a reasonable family life.
Yeah, that was myself. You start coaching, you always think, professional coaching must be the ideal world, But then speaking to some people, I'm like, wow, it's been a bit of an eye-opener into the amount of time that's spent, which it needs to be done to a degree maybe, but I think that it's just such a demand because they're not normal working hours. You don't turn up for a training day and they 8 until 4 and then switch off for the night. It's just constant. But that work-life balance really struck me quite hard because I think, as you well know, Ben, yourself, you probably got a couple of weeks off to go on a family vacation with your family throughout the whole year, whereas a normal person who works can take a week off and say, right, I'm going away. And they can't do that when it's in the middle of the season.
Did anyone have any cool triggers or methods to actually switch off?
Yeah, a few people usually just literally laptops down, phones down, and just sort of disappear into the wilderness for a couple of hours and a couple of days just to reset themselves. The usual things around people are talking about now these days. A lot of people are getting into mindfulness, which is fantastic. Exercise, jumping into those ice baths or jumping go for a sea, and just really disconnecting from the world and just probably the external noise, just to kind of get themselves back. But what I did like is about 50% of people did mention, but I probably think a lot of people did this a lot more. They spent intentional time with their family to just have that connection to make them feel a person again, not just that 24-hour rugby coach with everything just swirling around their heads.
Do you think it's dangerous if your identity becomes your job like that?
Yes, especially when you've got that fantastic coaching role in a different country where you're away from your family for such a long time, and you're potentially in a couple of people mentioned that they could be in university digs for the whole year. And it's, that isolation becomes something else. And then the constant swirling in the head, the noise just gets louder and louder. And unfortunately, that leads to certain bad habits and certain issues where, unless you sort of nip that in the bud, you can be walking down a really dangerous path. But it just shows how bad isolation is and what can happen to you. It's just the reality of it. And I was shocked because it popped up quite a lot.
Yeah. I know Tony Brown has a great squash is his outlet because he's very good is very analytical. But then he has this wonderful balance where he plays a lot of squash, and part of the reason for the squash is it's that exercise you talked about, but it's also it flicks him into a completely different way of thinking. Like he is not thinking of rugby whatsoever when he's on the squash court. It's fast, it's hectic, and he loves it, and he can play, and he books himself in all the time. It's good for you. He gets his competitive juices flowing. But finding something like a physical outlet is often a really useful thing to have, right? Like whether that's the gym or something like squash or whatever it is. Not so much. Well, the physical is important because it helps shape the mental, but that is the big thing, being able to switch right off. So if you're swimming laps and all you're doing is thinking about the next line out move, then it's not actually, you're not getting bang for your buck in terms of the exercise. So you probably got to find something which makes you like physically sharp and mentally switch right off. And I think that's the one.
Yeah. I think that was the main sort of thread, because a lot of people realized how much weight they were putting on when they were living away from family, because they were either eating too much, less exercise, because when they finished their day, they had no one to go back to. So they just literally sat there and opened the laptop back up and just continued working. Yeah, healthy well-being, body and mind is, it's hand in hand, really, isn't it?
Well, it's actually interesting you talk about the weight gain, because it's a very common trait for coaches, right? Like the weight gain is a common thing. And maybe part of it is too because you feel like you're actually tired after a session, but you haven't actually done much. You've just been on your feet and for a couple of hours. So you don't really feel like doing exercise yourself. However, you need to be aware that just standing around out in the field isn't actually doing a heck of a lot. So you've probably got to put in something beforehand or push yourself to do something after if you can.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think it's more mentally exhausting and stressful and when it gets to the point where you've got that hour or two, I'm not going to go to the gym, I just need to sit down and just do something else. So I totally understand that.
Well, a lot of coaches in that sort of pro space, when you've got gyms accessible, they do it before everyone gets in. I know certainly a lot of environments I've been in, all the coaches are in at the crack of dawn before the players are even in the building, because everybody knows at the end of the day you're going to be gassed because of that mental feeling. So let's get it in before, start the day off right, start the way off with the intention that you should want to progress it with, and get yourself right first. And that's a good little philosophy every morning. So get your routines, whether that's what you eat, how you connect with your loved ones, the physical exertion you do, even the mental mindfulness that you talked about. Start off with that so it flows on for the rest of the day, right?
And I think that'll set a really good culture and a safe environment then as well, because you've got that closeness. You know how to speak to each other. The language comes in. Everything is set, and then you've got a good little basis there for that psychological safety.
Yes, and it also sets a great example for, even if people don't see it, the ripples that it's been done does spread, and that is the example as a coach. You want your players to have that sort of intention around themselves, and you lead that by example. So it's, it is helping, isn't it?
Oh, 100%. I think, like you said, things don't go unnoticed in environments like that.
Oh, mate, I love it. Now, mate, if we're talking, mate, if you had to sum up the key message from your book for coaches, how would you sum that up, mate? What would be the big one walk away that you would give them from the research that's come from The Invisible Load?
Yeah. Okay. Like I said, the book I've written and the research is really about the hidden side of coaching, really. And people see the coach on the sideline, they see the session, the selection of the team, and they talk about the results. But like we said before, they're not seeing that sort of what the coach is carrying. So for me, the research came clear. The coaches are coming back to what we said before, that emotional shock absorber, we need to make sure that they look after themselves, really, because the key themes that came through for the whole of it was, understanding that organizational support, and identifying what that invisible load and how you're going to deal with that yourself. That work-life balance and the switching off we just spoke about, managing your emotional labor, and trying to how can you get around that confidentiality and trust within your environment. And coach well-being and performance, as I said, it's not separate from the performance. I think it sits underneath the performance. So realistically, it's everything we talked about. We need to understand that there's lots of things out there to look into ourselves, because not everyone's the same at all, and we need to make sure that coaches get that support, and it needs to be formal rather than informal.
Yeah, man. Mate, Stu, it's such good work you're doing, mate. And shedding light and awareness on this side of things is just important, mate. It's important for a lot of people. Stu, well, here's a question to finish up with on this podcast, and I'm trying to just tweak it now for you. What is one thing that you believe in around the wellness side of coaching that you agree with, but you think others may not agree with?
I think it's coming back to what we've already spoken about. I'm very, everyone's different, Ben, as you well know. Very much that open person who will speak to people about ongoing issues or things I don't think that sit right. And sometimes that doesn't sit right with other people because of a culture or because of how they are individually or as a collective environment. So I think it's personally, people need to be strong enough and be confident enough to explain what's going on with them. Because if there's something going on personally, then the organization and everyone around you needs to dig in and help you out. So I think it's being open, honest, have that honest conversation about how we support each other. This isn't about blame. It's about awareness. It's about that responsibility and building healthier, sustainable coaching environments rather than going back to the dark, archaic ages of man up and get on with it.
Love that.
So just deal with it head on.
Stu Edwards, thank you so much, mate, for coming on the podcast. I'm just going to give a real quick summation of this awesome chat, mate, and 3 key points, which I think I just want to bring people back to, and they are these. Number one is that people don't see the emotional weight behind the role of coaching, the general public, and the emotional labor that's involved in it. So as a coach, it is important that you create and raise it in your environments and be comfortable enough and brave enough to get it out there. This is what you expect. This is what you hope for. And try make some of these informal and inconsistent support networks more consistent and more formal. And I think that's a job and a role that you can take on if you're brave enough. Number 2, this phrasing that coaches want understanding, not sympathy. I really love that, man. I love that the researchers sort of highlighted that. And for coaches, to get that understanding is to be able to speak without fear, to be brave enough with that psychological safety to say the things that are bugging you and create that understanding. And I think that goes a long way to actually soothing and dying down some of that swirl that's going on in your head. And number 3, talking about the swirl that goes on in your head is actually to work towards having a sounding board that you trust and use regularly. That could be a fellow coach, that could be a friend or an old person coming into the environment regularly. Whoever it is, a kit man, for example, or kit woman, someone that's there that you can just vent what you're feeling and have a trusted voice and a trusted pair of ears that listen, process, and help you get out of the swirl you're in. Because sometimes, and often as a coach, you can't see the wood from the trees, and you need someone that can. Stu Edwards, what an absolute pleasure, mate. And the book, The Invisible Load, is out now on Amazon, and I encourage all coaches and leaders to go and grab it. And it talks about the pressure, the stress, the well-being, about sustainable coaching in rugby. And you could cross out rugby and say any sport or any business or any relationship exercise. The Invisible Load is there all the time. So on Amazon now, go grab it, and it's an important thing to support. And I know that your work is now being picked up by a lot of people, mate, from the highest echelons of the game, and now taking you on, mate. So that's really exciting, right?
Yeah, it's 100%. It's it's gained the momentum I wanted. It's sparked that conversation. Yeah, let's keep it going, and let's make some noise to make sure that people really get the support they need.
Yeah, man. I hope. Well, we've got a great community behind this podcast, mate. I'm sure they'll absolutely get behind the amazing stuff that you're doing. Stu Edwards, The Invisible Load on Amazon now.